The couch sank beside me. I didn't move. I knew I was alone. It was a subtle shift, a quiet compression of the springs and foam, just enough to make the hairs on my arms stand up. I live in a quiet neighborhood in Missouri, the kind of place where the loudest sound at night is usually a cricket or a distant car. The walls are thin enough to hear a neighbor sneeze, but that night, the only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the gentle murmur of the TV I'd left on for company. Nothing strange ever happens here. This is a place of manicured lawns and predictable routines. Not this the first time it happened. It was just a small shift in the cushions. I'd been half asleep, watching some late-night talk show. I felt it more than I saw it, a slight dip, as if a cat had jumped up and was settling in. But I don't have a cat. I sat up, wide awake, and stared at the empty space beside me. The cushion was perfectly smooth. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the springs were getting old, or I'd shifted without realizing it. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, a product of a tired mind in a dark room. I went to bed and tried to forget about it. But the next night it happened again. This time, it was more defined. The indentation was deeper, more deliberate. Then came the cold. A pocket of frigid air brushed against my arm, so specific and localized it couldn't have been a draft from the window. It wasn't the ambient temperature of the room dropping. It was a personal cold, a chill that seemed to emanate from the empty space beside me. Goosebumps erupted on my skin. I didn't move a muscle, my eyes fixed on the television screen, pretending not to notice. But my heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. This wasn't the house settling. This was something else. On the third night I was prepared, or so I thought. I sat on the far end of the couch, a fortress of pillows built around me. I kept the lights on in the kitchen and the hallway, pushing back against the shadows. But darkness has a way of creeping in. As the clock ticked past midnight, the familiar dip in the cushion returned, and then, I saw it. In my peripheral vision, a shape began to form. It was darker than the dark, a void in the dim light of the living room. It was a patch of nothingness that slowly took on a humanoid silhouette, sitting right where no one was supposed to be. It had no features, no texture, just an unsettling presence. I kept my eyes locked on the TV, my knuckles white as I gripped a pillow. A single, desperate rule formed in my mind. Don't look, don't turn your head, don't acknowledge it, because I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it wanted me to, it wanted to be seen. The next morning, shaking and sleep-deprived, I did the only thing I could think of. I called the police. I tried to explain, my voice trembling, how I felt someone was in my house at night, how something was sitting with me. They were patient, professional. 2 officers came, a man and a woman. They searched the house from top to bottom. They checked every room, every closet, the attic, the basement. They shined their flashlights into every dark corner. After a thorough search, they came back to the living room. "Ma'am, you're alone," the male officer said, his voice gentle but firm. "The house is secure. There's no one here." I looked over at the couch. It was pristine, the cushions perfectly plump and smooth. There was no sign of the indentation, no lingering cold. They saw a tired, scared woman in an empty house. They probably thought I was lonely or losing my mind. They left, advising me to keep my doors locked. As their car pulled away, the feeling of being alone was the most terrifying thing in the world. That night, the silence was heavier than ever. I didn't turn on the TV. I sat in the dark, listening. For hours there was nothing. I almost let myself believe it was over, that my call to the police had somehow scared it away. Then the television screen flickered to life on its own. It wasn't a channel, just a screen of roaring static, casting the room in a frantic, dancing light. My breath caught in my throat, and then I felt it. The couch sank, slower this time, deeper, heavier, as if a much more substantial weight was settling in beside me. The static hissed and popped, the only sound in the room besides my own ragged breathing. I could feel it lean closer. There was no breath, no rustle of clothing, no sound of movement at all. Just an immense pressure in the air next to me, a palpable sense of waiting. It was a predator's stillness. It was toying with me, seeing how long I could last. My rule, don't look, don't look, don't look, was a screaming mantra in my head. My neck muscles were tight with the strain of keeping my head forward. I could feel its proximity, a cold that seeped into my side, making my teeth chatter. It felt like it was inches from my face, studying me in the flickering light of the static. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The waiting was the worst part. It was a battle of wills, and I was losing. On the 4th night, I broke my rule. I don't know why. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was a desperate need for it to be over. Or maybe, just maybe, a small part of me needed to know what I was so afraid of. The pressure beside me was immense. a physical weight in the room. I felt the couch dip even further. The air grew impossibly cold. Taking a shaky breath, I turned my head. The movement felt agonizingly slow, like moving through water. My eyes left the safety of the wall in front of me and traveled across the empty space of the room, toward the static-lit darkness beside me.